So why did I even start homesteading in the first place? Let's have a chit chat today. I didn't come from a family of farmers or even gardeners. So what exactly inspired me to start my own homestead? In fact, when I was younger, I didn't even like animals. I didn't like dogs, I didn't like cats, I didn't like any type of animal. Certainly not chickens, nor did I know anything about them. So what exactly inspired me to build a big garden? To have all kinds of food of our very own to grow. I didn't even know what canning was or how to can my own food. Nobody in my family had ever canned their own food. So it was all new to me. So everyone has a great story of why they decided to start their own homestead journey. And I've just read so many great and interesting stories and watched so many great interesting stories on YouTube. So today I decided to share my own story of why I started homesteading to begin with. So like I said earlier, I didn't grow up on a farm. I didn't grow up with homesteaders. I didn't grow up with someone growing a big garden, and I didn't come from that kind of family. So I didn't know anything about the homestead world at all. When I was a kid, I didn't like animals. I didn't like any animals. It didn't matter what it was. I didn't even know that people still like raised flocks of chickens and goats and things like that. I thought that was, Little House on the Prairie Day stuff. So it was just all really new to me when I discovered that I wanted to be a homesteader. So when I was in my early 20s, I had some flower gardens, and we owned this little piece of property, and we built some flower gardens, and that was basically the extent of my gardening. And that was basically going to the nursery and buying annuals and putting them in the garden. So I would have all my pretty flowers, and they looked so nice, and I thought I was doing great. So it never even crossed my mind to ever want to grow vegetables. I didn't like vegetables growing up. We didn't eat vegetables. I guess my family was a meat and potato family, or a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugary foods, foods that just weren't good for you. Even drinks, they were all sugary drinks, Kool-Aid, that kind of thing. So I didn't know anything about even healthy food. What was healthy? If it was healthy, it didn't even matter to me. So I didn't grow up eating any fruits or vegetables. So I thought, when I made my flower gardens, I didn't even think about, gardening in a different type of way, because who needed vegetables anyway, right? So when my husband and I were in our late 20s, we purchased a piece of property with a house on it, and for a very low cost. And it was 7 acres of land, and that's the property we live on now. And a house that was just basically a shell. So we had a ton of work to do, but it also meant that we were not going to be in debt forever, and which was a huge plus for us. And we weren't rich, so we could actually afford the price that we paid for the house. So the house basically needed a ton of work done on the inside, And not only that, but it needed a ton of work done on the outside also. Like, it was just a mess. Everything was all grown up. It was a mess. So our first couple years here was really put into making it a home. We had three young children at the time, so that was really hard, and I was managing a job, and it was just very difficult to first move in to a place that would one day actually be the start of a homestead. So my husband mowed the tall grass and weeds down, and that made a huge improvement. And we got the house livable, even though still to this day we're still working on, you know, making it look really good. Like, we're still working, we still have not got siding on it after all these years, but hopefully that will be next year. So then I decided to build some flower beds. So my husband helped me make some flower beds out of some rock gardens, and I continued to do the same thing. I continued to grow tons of annual flowers, and I thought one day this whole place is just going to be flower gardens, just flower gardens everywhere. So if we fast forward just a few years, one day my husband and I decided that we needed a change. So we actually packed up our children, our 5 children by now, and moved all the way from upstate New York to North Carolina. We moved to the city, we got jobs. I'm a nurse, so I worked at a veterans nursing home there, and my husband got a job also. And so we lived in a city, which was totally different, because here we have no neighbors. It was all new to us. Like, when you go outside, everybody would just like gawk at you like you were like an alien from another planet or something. It was really weird. So we didn't have any land at all, of course, because in the city, you really, most of the time, especially when you're renting, you don't have any land. So I remember putting in some flowers in the backyard, and the neighbors' dogs dug them all up. So that was the end of my gardening in North Carolina. We stayed there for about 6 months. We were actually there for a year, but 6 months into it, I realized that I am not happy here. I hated it there, and not because of anything to do with North Carolina, because North Carolina, I think, is a beautiful state, and the weather is so much better than ours here in upstate New York. But it wasn't home. It wasn't. I guess maybe if we lived in the country and had land, it probably would have been a lot different. But because we live in the city, and it was just so strange, and I just really wanted to go back home. So after being there a year, we decided to go all the way from North Carolina all the way back to upstate New York. So one of the biggest reasons that we left North Carolina too was, I just felt like I did not want to work every single day and leave my children, and it just felt like I was just working all the time. And my husband was working all the time just to pay our rent, just to pay our bills, just to, the pay was good and all, but it basically all went for bills. And something just said that, there's a better way. There's a better way, And so after we moved home, things started to happen. Actually, I remember being in North Carolina and just being so upset and so unhappy, and just praying and asking God, what should I do? So he actually told me, I want you to go home, build a garden, and get a flock of chickens. And I'm like, what? You want me to do what? So I didn't know anything about that at all, but suddenly there was this desire in my heart that I wanted to learn. Like, so the first thing, I just started looking up all this information about chickens and all the, and how to take care of them and what I needed to keep them. And so then I grew really, really excited. I couldn't wait to go back home to New York. I couldn't wait to get my first flock of chickens and start whatever it was I was going to start. So we moved back to start our lives once again in upstate New York. I remember when I got back to New York, it was early August, and we hadn't been here, and of course we didn't sell our land. We kept our house because, you know, we didn't know if we were actually going to like it down in North Carolina or not. So we get home and the grass is really, really tall. So it was kind of like starting from scratch again. So we were walking around the property and I noticed these wild blackberry bushes just growing everywhere. And I was just like, wow, I never knew, all those years I've been here, I never knew we had blackberries. Like, I never paid attention. So I decided to start picking some, and something else sparked inside of me. I'm like, oh, I just, you know, I want to have a garden. I really do want to have a garden. I really do want to grow my own food. And I don't even know how all that desire came about, except I really believe that it was just something that God put on my heart. And so, of course, I start watching every YouTube video I can find on gardening and raising chickens and canning my own food. And yeah, so when I first tasted those blackberries, it was like I had just this fire inside of me, and that I decided that I was going to use the fall and the winter time to really learn everything that I needed to know to be successful at growing my first garden. So we decided to get some chickens. We built a small little chicken coop. It was like a chicken shack. It was really bad, but it worked, and it kept them safe. And they had like this little tiny run where they could come out in a little fenced-in area, which I didn't know better then. You know, my fence wasn't even really tall enough to keep the chickens in. They just kept flying over the fence, and so I had to keep putting them back in. We lost a couple because of them getting out, and a dog, and then one from a fox. So like those first losses were really, really tough on me, and I think I actually cried because when I lost my first chickens. And so I continued to just add to the flock, and eventually I had a lot of chickens. But they brought so much joy and so much calmness just watching them peck around the yard, and just watching them just brought like this calmness and peace to my soul that was just so refreshing. It was like it just felt right. It just felt like this is what I was supposed to do with my life. So that must have been the longest winter ever, because I was so excited to have my first garden that I just couldn't wait. So spring finally came. I started my indoor plants. I started some tomatoes and some peppers and things like that indoors. And of course, if anybody knows upstate New York, we know winter literally does seem to last forever anyway, no matter what. So spring came, we tilled up a decent sized garden, and it was really hard clay soil. So not only that, we spent so much time, me and even my husband and the kids, we were picking rocks, these great big rocks out of the ground, and I'm like, oh great. So we must have spent like a whole season just picking rocks. But even during that time, I planted my first garden, and it actually turned out to be a really good garden for the first year. it was really dry, so I was watering so much and but it was joyful. It didn't seem like work. It just seemed like fun. It was just really a joy that I had never experienced before, not as a child, not as a teenager, but now I was a grown adult, and for the first time I was learning like what nature was all about, and I grew to just fall in love with everything about nature. So then I learned how to grow, or how to can all the food from my garden. So I canned some tomatoes. I made lots of spaghetti sauce, and canned tomatoes and green beans and carrots, and I shredded zucchini and froze it for zucchini bread. Like, I was just all excited. And I canned a ton of applesauce from our big apple tree out front. Like, we have this big apple tree out front, and it produces apples every other year. And every year I would watch them just fall to the ground. Like, I didn't do anything with them. Like, it didn't click in my brain like, hey, maybe I ought to use these. So I did. I used them. I peeled apples for weeks, and I canned the applesauce, and I canned apple pie filling and apple butter. And so I decided that I was not going to let those apples go to waste any longer. And then, of course, my chickens enjoyed all the leftovers. So after that first year of gardening and canning and taking care of chickens for a year, the following year I decided to try some meat turkeys and some meat chickens, and I quickly just fell in love with anything that had to do with homesteading. I learned to compost, I learned to add organic matter to soil. You know, fast forward a couple years, I watched the Back to Eden film, which was the best thing that ever happened to that horrible clay soil in my garden. And so now I'm ready to move forward. And so for quite a few years, I've really just been focusing on getting the soil in my garden really good to where the crops are getting their roots down in with that Back to Eden method, and it looking really good. So now this year, I'm hoping before winter comes that I'm going to get my goat house built, because I really want to raise goats next year. I really want to get some goats and expand my animal farm a little bit more, because right now we have chickens, rabbits, and one duck, which I've been looking for a female duck for him, because he needs a companion. So I'd like to get a couple of female ducks. I've really been looking hard, and so far finding female adult ducks have been a challenge for me. And I've been looking, and I put an ad on Craigslist that I was looking for some, and no response yet. So I'm hoping that I can find a couple of female ducks for springtime. So I guess my basic reason that I started homesteading is that it quickly just became a part of me, and they can't be separated. Like, it just became who I am. It became what fulfilled me. And every single aspect of it just brings me great, incredible joy. I would truly be lost if I didn't have my animals, and I didn't have my garden, and I didn't have all the knowledge of what I'm doing. Like, it has just become a huge part of my life that I really, really love. And it brings me so much joy to be able to grow healthy, good food for my children, and to be able to offer them fresh fruit and vegetables from the garden, and to just give them a whole different life than I had growing up. To give them a life that is raised around farm animals, and those survival skills that they need, and how to can and do all of those things. Like, I'm so glad that I can give them that type of life, which is one of the biggest joys. So that pretty much sums up my story on why I started this homestead adventure. And I just thank God who made all of this possible every single day. So now we are going to see what inspired my friend Tammy to start homesteading. So even though we have a really small homestead, I do have some future goals. Like this year, I'm really hoping to get my goat house built for getting goats next spring. And I really want to make a market garden and learn how to make a profit from my homestead. I still work as a nurse right now, just casually. I go in like if they need someone. So I don't work very much. And I'm really hoping to find a way to make a profit from my homestead so that I no longer have to leave the homestead at all. These chickens are just a joy to watch. Even though they're loud, they somehow bring calmness. Alright everyone, we are at Tammy's house and we are going to find out what she loves about homesteading, why she decided to start homesteading. So why did you?
Well, actually, this is funny, don't laugh. I love Little House on the Prairie, and as a kid, I watched it all the time and wanted to be Carolyn, not Laura, Carolyn. So living like them really has always been like a dream as a young person. But as an adult, obviously, we can't go back in time and live at Little House days, but my father was quite the gardener and into his herbs, living naturally, living organically. So my love for that came from him. So after I was married, we were able to buy a piece of land in the country, and I was like, heaven, because now I'm gonna have my garden. And so I was able to start growing my own food and learned about canning, and then we moved into some goats and some chickens and just everything about living naturally, living from the land, having the animals. That's just, I got that love from my dad and I still have it.
So what was your favorite part about homesteading? Like, what is your favorite part about homesteading?
The garden.
The garden?
The garden. My favorite thing to do, once you get those seeds in the ground, those seedlings in the ground, every morning, it's like I can actually get up. It's fun to get up because I want my coffee and head out to that garden and see how much they've grown, how much it's changed, and just watch it all happen. That's the best. I mean, I love everything else, the chicken, and I love to, you know, do preserving food and all that, but to watch it grow and see that progress, that's the best.
What was your favorite animal to raise? Like, what was your favorite?
Well, the easiest to raise are the chickens.
Well, yeah.
But in all honesty, the hard ones were my favorites. I love the goats. The bigger goats, of course, are really hard. They eat everything you have, every flower, every bush, if they're loose. And they can get loose very easily. They're very strong. They think they can come in the house, sleep on the porch, but I loved all of it. Yeah, I absolutely love the goats. Now, having said all that, I at the moment don't even have my own land and homestead. My husband passed away, the kids and I moved. It was a little easier being closer to family and in the village. So we're not in the city by any means, but we don't have the land that we have. We do have it, but we are not using it. So what I do now, I try to do some container gardening and some indoor plants. And of course, my favorite thing to grow and use are herbs. So that works real easy for me being here. So animal-wise, obviously, I'm not doing anything right now except for what I can do when I'm out at Jamie's. So from here, like I said, I just do the container and the indoor for what I can do, and plan is to get back out to the country and have that land back and get back to working it.
And you've learned so much about herbs, and you've taught me a few things and really got me into wanting to grow herbs, so yeah, it's really a good thing.
And that all came from my dad too, that love. But they're so healthy and they're so so beneficial in so many different ways, and just, yeah, I absolutely love them.
All right, great. All right, everyone, so we hope that you will subscribe and like our video, and stay tuned for more videos.
See you later.